Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of TubbTalk, Wired for Connection, the podcast where we explore the human side of the IT and MSP industry. I'm Lenka, I'm the operations manager at Tubblog, and I'm so excited to be your co-host for this brand new spin-off of TubbTalk, the podcast for managed service providers. Normally, you would hear the voice of Richard Tubb, but this time we're taking a fresh perspective, one that's women-led and focused on amplifying diverse, underrepresented voices in the industry and looking mostly at human stories. In these podcasts, we'll be having real, unfiltered conversations about the experiences, challenges, and triumphs of the people who are shaping IT today, from women in tech to LGBTQ plus leaders and those driving real change in MSPs. And I'm not going to do it alone. I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Vera Tucci, an inspiring MSP leader and an advocate for diversity in tech. Vera, welcome to Wired for Connection.
Hi, Lenka. Thank you. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I'm really excited about this podcast and co-hosting it. And I am here to help other voices be heard.
So I wanted to give a little bit of a context to why we're doing it or how it even started. And this spin-off with a natural organic reaction.
I'm sorry. I wanted to go through all the little part that I insert. Do you think that's okay? Is it too long? Should we go back to the introduction and I can read the entire thing? Is that okay with you? I cut it short because I wasn't sure that you were okay with the length.
No. Go for it.
Okay, perfect. So I will read the entire thing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Lenka. And hello, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to be co-hosting this podcast alongside with you. My name is Vera Tucci, and I'm a passionate advocate for diversity, inclusion, and authentic leadership in the IT and MSP space, an industry that I've been a part of for over 17 years now. As the co-founder of an IT company and someone who has navigated this industry, I've often found myself in rooms where I didn't quite fit the mold. That experience, feeling like an outsider, but choosing to turn that into a strength, is exactly why this podcast means so much to me. Wired for Connection isn't just a podcast, it's a mission. It's about creating space for every perspective, every voice, every take on our industry. And it's a space where different leadership style and different sounds have a voice and have their own chance to share their unfiltered and unapologetic story and take on our industry. So I'm here to share, to listen, and mostly to champion those voices that too often has been left out and unheard. I can't wait to hear them alongside with you. So let's get started and let's get connected.
I am so excited that we are doing this because this podcast came from an organic conversation that we had at Pax8 Beyond in Berlin last year, where yourself, myself, my colleague Karina, we're just talking there about, women's stuff and about some of the challenges that you face being a woman in the workforce, being in leadership roles, being in IT, and the things that maybe are not spoken about as often as they should. And that's where we started thinking about this idea of bringing in different voices, different representation, slightly different take on the IT and MSP industry. TubbTalk, the podcast for MSPs with Richard, will continue as it always did. Richard will still have conversations more looking at the tech side, geeking out about the nitty-gritty of the industry, about the latest trends, about the latest solutions, about, the business strategies. But over here, we're looking to bring in guests and people who have stories from overcoming adversity, from overcoming the challenges, and companies who are really leading on this path towards change, towards making workspaces more inclusive, more friendly, more welcoming, more open. So, what can we then, what can our listeners expect from this spin-off show? What it is that we really want to accomplish with this, Vera?
Think that mostly our listeners will discover new voices and new perspective uh, in our industry, in our world, because let's say, and it's common knowledge that um, there are a few voices that have been leading the way so far, and that is extremely valuable, but it's also a little bit narrow when it comes to representation and when it comes to inspiring other people. It's important that we have different takes on a specific matter, a different perspective and a different um, life experience that one can share. And as women, we have that um, fresh take on the MSP industry because we are quite new in the space. Maybe our colleagues in the US have been dealing with this topic for a little bit longer now, but in the UK and in Europe, this is still new. We are still talking about why companies should have a diversity policy. Maybe we are a little bit behind if we consider that somewhere in the world people are talking about dismantling the diversity and inclusion program, and we are still building them. So I think it's good that we are in this moment in time because we can really make a difference for all the people that maybe have this fear that the talk around diversity and inclusion will go away. So maybe they're new in the space and maybe they are afraid that they won't have a chance to be heard or to be represented. So you mentioned our first encounter at Pax8 Beyond, and I think that that was the perfect set for our conversation because it was one of the most women populated event that I've ever experienced in my life, both on stage and in the audience at the vendor booth. I am always amazed when I see more women year after year. And the thing that we discussed was why in the event overall, why aren't more women um, curated moments for us and our needs, but everything is still very male oriented. And that's, I think it's okay because that's the way that things have been for so long. But we have a chance to reshape the industry in a way that includes other people's needs. And of course, we will talk more about women because that's who we identify with. So we share our take, but this is not just a moment for women to speak up. We want this to be a space where everyone who feels still unheard can jump on a call with us and share their experience. So it's really open and it's something that won't be there won't be a sort of acceptance ground rule. There are no ground rules for being our guest. It's more about how much do you want to share? How can we listen to your real story, the person behind the professional? It's more about being vulnerable, which is a kind of a weird world in the MSP industry, but it's that's what we're looking for. People sharing stories, not just their resume, their experiences that are great and very worthy of respect and admiration, but we want to dig deeper into the personal side of things.
As you were talking about Pax8 Beyond, one thing that really struck me on that event as we were going around, doing our thing, recording videos, doing interviews, shining spotlight on vendors and incredible MSPs, we really noticed that yes, there are quite a few women out there, but they're not the one to be willing to go in front of the camera. We were on purpose looking for women. We were like, let's bring in a little bit of the variety. We want to hear the take from women on this event, on their experience in the booth. And every single time we approached a booth where we saw women, immediately they were bringing in the man. It was like, oh, here's our CEO, here's our guy, this is the spokesperson. I'm not the one to talk. Here's someone else, here's another man to represent. And that was really kind of heartbreaking for me a little bit because I know that the women will be capable of telling the story, of showcasing the company, of really bringing in forward the important part. But maybe it's not a company culture, maybe they have not been encouraged, maybe they simply, don't feel it's their place to speak up. And I think this is really for me the root cause of wanting to have this podcast is allowing anyone and everyone to feel empowered to have a voice because we all have stories to tell. And I am new in this industry. So for me, I am still learning about the ins and outs of the industry. But the one thing that did struck me, it's very welcoming, it's very friendly. The IT support, the support part, is truly, really living through. It's a lifeline of this industry. And yet it's so interesting that still when we touch on these topics of inclusivity, of giving women voices, there is still something holding us back, be it, the status quo, that's how it's always been done. We're just not taught to think differently. There not enough visibility showcasing people, companies who are doing it differently. But obviously you are one of the leaders of pushing and breaking a little bit of the boundaries and being heard and seen and visible and really making your mark in the industry. You've built an incredible career in IT. Can you share a moment when you felt like you didn't maybe fit the traditional mold of an MSP leader? And how did you overcome it? And what have you learned from that experience?
There's so much in everything that you said that I think we could cover 10 episodes of this podcast with just what you just said in the last minute. Um, a lot of the things that I've felt in the years, I think they go back to what you just said about the women at the booth at Paxay Beyond. It has a lot to do with our sense of perfectionism. We want to be perfect before we speak up. We want to make sure that we have absolutely everything under control and that no one can surprise us with a question that we are not confident with the answer to that question. So the reason why a lot of us bring forward the men is because we intrinsically feel unprepared for this kind of environment. And that goes alongside with the idea that we don't have a technical background, more in a general way. More and more young women are approaching this field when they choose an academic path. But in our days, which is like 15, 20 years, it was different. So we don't have that technical background quite often. And that lack translates into a lack of confidence. This environment is not closed. As you said, it's welcoming, but it's also intimidating because it has its own language, its own rules, and its own way to approach things. When you talk to a male technician, there are some things that you cannot mention, but just because that creates immediately a distance in between us and them, which is what we wanted to dismantle, right? Because we are all people and we are all in this together. But to go back to your main question, the moment when I felt that I didn't fit the mold, I think it's not just a moment, it's the first 8 years of my career, I I had a hard time speaking up, raising my hand in a meeting and share my view on something. And it's my company. I wasn't there to, I wasn't in a position where I was asking for a promotion or I wanted to stand out because I want to advance in my career. I was already at the top of the company. But at the same time, I felt that my my team knew way more than me. So I shouldn't say something. And that's a feeling that I've carried on with me for so long, um, until I met a couple of people in our industry that opened the door for me. And they said, "Oh, you should go walk through this door and sit at the table because you can." And when you use the word leader in your in your introduction before, my first reaction mentally was to say, me, a leader? No, 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 no. I'm not a leader. And this is the general idea that a lot of women have about themselves. Um, we are not trained to think about ourselves as leader. We have to rewire ourselves when we grow up. If we want to have a leadership role, there's a huge effort on our side to create a different view of the world, of ourselves. So I don't have a specific moment to share, but I can share the moment when I felt that I could talk, I should talk and I should speak. And I had something to say and to share. But it's connected with the confidence that we feel, and not it's not something that comes from the outside. It's something that must shift within ourselves to give us that confidence.
And I think it's interesting to think about this industry or any industry whatsoever in terms of more women doesn't mean more competition. And I really want to make sure that, we make the point of really supporting our sisters, supporting other women. It's not that there's only a limited amount of seats on the table. I really don't like the events where they feel like they have to comply with the diversity rules, so they will have a token woman or token person of color or token representative of a minority just to comply with the rules. We're not looking for these situations. We're not saying that there is limited amount. We're coming from a place of abundance. We're coming from a place of there is space for everyone. The more the merrier, the more stories, the more diversity, the more creativity, more different perspectives. We know that that creates much stronger, faster growth and healthier companies and healthier environments. So for me, this is all about more. It's all about the abundance rather than, looking at the scare few and like being a token person representing rather than really just going balls to the wall and be like, yes, anyone, everyone, come in. There is space for everyone. And I love that you said that there's no barrier, there's no rule for who we're going to accept as our guest on this podcast, aside from do you have a story? Are you willing to open up? Do you want to share a little bit about your experiences? What have you experienced? What actions have you taken? What lessons have you taken from there? Where did it move you? Why are you doing to do this?
Yes, absolutely. And I just remembered a little episode that is quite funny in retrospective that just sums up this idea that there's no scarcity. There's a place for everyone, and we can all thrive, and we can all have our space. A few years ago, I've been lucky enough to being asked by IT Nation to deliver a breakout session about diversity and inclusion in the MSP world. So I created a presentation that was written from a perspective of someone that is a woman and doesn't have a technical background. So the idea was, why should MSPs do this, and how this kind of approach can have an impact on their growth and their success. So it was more about leveraging the cliches and the misconception about not being technical and being a woman whatsoever. So I love that presentation. I love the audience. It was a few men, more women. I used a lot of Taylor Swift references because that's part of my personality. The fun thing is that at the end of that session, 30-minute session, the first question came from a man that was in the first row. He raised his hand and said, I heard you, but don't you think that this is a discrimination against men? And I laugh about it because after that question, I've met this person twice. And every time we meet each other at an event, he says, "Oh, I'm so and so. Do you remember me? I asked you that awkward question at the end of your speech." So he was aware of being a little, off topic. But the point is, it's not. It's not. Promoting diversity doesn't mean that someone should be left. It's the opposite. Diversity and inclusion means there's space for every voice. So it's not that if I have a seat at the table, you will lose your chair. It's more about, let's squeeze in another chair so that we can have a different kind of conversation. And this is something that I think we have to push as a message. There's no reason to fear diversity and inclusion because nobody will pay the price for it. There are no bad consequences.
I love this story. It's so common. You will hear it a lot when diversity and inclusion is discussed. It's, if you're taking my seat, there's no more seats left for me. And again, we can build bigger tables. We can build a system of rotating on the table so everyone has a chance to have a say. And that's what we're trying to do here a little bit. It's to build an environment where, anyone and everyone. And it's where, we don't want to say this is women in tech kind of a podcast, because of course we want to hear from men who have opinions and experiences and who have been working and supporting, who have been allies towards, inclusion and empowering women and, again, people of all sorts of minorities. So this is not to say that, again, there is any kind of an exclusion. What we're trying to say is that representation matters, that we really want to put out there a little bit more variety of role models in the tech to show different career paths, different possibilities, and to lift up people who feel that they don't have a voice, they're not being heard, who might have brilliant ideas, who may be incredible speakers on the stage, who can really move businesses and the industry as a whole forward, but maybe because they don't see themselves out there represented, they don't hear voices like themselves, people who look like them, who speak like them, who behave like them, who come from similar backgrounds, who have faced similar challenges. That's because right now we need more variety. So we've kind of laid out a little bit the premise of this podcast. Do you have any specific people or topics, ideas that you're most excited to bring to the show? What are you really looking forward to most in this journey as a co-host of this podcast?
I have a list of dream guests that I would love to interview. Well, first of all, it is a dream for me to interview someone because I love communication and I love speaking, but also I absolutely am a fan of being a listener. I love being in the audience. I love um, getting all the energy from a speaker and from someone who is there to share their story. So I have a list of ideal guests that I would love to interview, and all the people that I came up with, men, women, CEOs, managers, different paths, different careers, have something human that sparks joy for me. They have a very specific human touch when it comes to approach you, sharing their stories, asking questions. So what I look for the most is getting them on board and ask all the questions that I always wanted to ask, but usually a speaker doesn't have the time to address every question from the audience. And I want to learn more about their journey because I only know my journey and I know my experience. So my view of the world is pretty narrow. I have a company of 15 people. I live in a small town. I live in a country where the MSP community is still pretty young and pretty small compared to the UK or the US. So I want to get as much inspiration as I can from their experiences. So I cannot wait to have those people on our podcast so that we can just listen to them, and especially men. Allow me to say this. Um, Especially the men that I consider allies, that I consider as a vehicle for us to access some resources, because it's a reality check. More men are in a position of power than women, so we cannot change the world overnight. Um, but we can put ourselves next to those men who are there to say, okay, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna support you, I'm gonna speak your name in a room full of opportunities, or I'm just gonna check in with you every once in a while. So I want to know from them what created that sort of mindset. What was the source of inspiration for them? Was it natural? Was it something that they grew up with? Was it family? Or was it life that taught them how to be an ally? And on the other side, I want to know the stories of women that have a background that is not um, it's not perfect on books, right? When you grow up in an entrepreneurial environment, or you maybe are a second generation entrepreneur, you have one path. But if you come from a completely different kind of background, or if you have created your professional career just with your energy and your passion and your sacrifices, those are the stories that I want to hear the most. The story of overcoming the barrier, as you said before. What about you? Do you have something in mind specifically when you think about our guest?
I don't think I have a specific guest in mind. As I said, I am still more new in this industry. I'm still learning who are the movers and shakers and people. But what I've learned is that different communities, there will be again different minorities, different communities all around the world. That, yes, we're based in the UK, in the Ireland, in Europe, we have US, but also then you have, little pockets of you're in Italy, we have France, we have South Africa. Every time we go to events, there are people from all around the world and they will have different perspectives, their environment. Like, I'm curious, like, how differs South Africa MSP to Middle East MSP to, somewhere who is more Eastern Europe MSP? Do we have Eastern Europe MSPs? I'm from the Czech Republic. I have no idea if we have that kind of an industry in our country. Who would be the people? So for me, it's a journey of learning and discovery and opening up new doors, even for myself, to learn about this industry beyond, again, the people that you are more likely to meet on every single MSP event that you go to. They're lovely, of course they're lovely, but then looking for the people who are not always so visible. And as you said, it can be men, women, whoever, however you identify, that's fine with us. But one thing I also wanted to say, as you were talking about, the speaking with the men who are the allies. Obviously, I wanted to give shout out to Richard for allowing us to do this and empowering us to do this. Because when this idea came to be, it was me suggesting that he should maybe bring someone like you as a co-host, as a voice, but he was like, no, 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 I don't want to be involved. It's your thing. You create whatever you want to do. I fully support you. And he is a true example of, really being a supportive and lifting anyone and everyone. Our team is pretty much female-led, female-focused. Like we have Richard, but the rest of the team is heavily female. And it's incredible to see the dynamics that we have, and again, the opportunities that he is allowing us to have. So that's one shout out there that we are here. I'm super aware of it that we're here because of Richard has already podcast, has an audience, and he's allowing us to bring in these stories into the mix.
Yes, absolutely. It's a shout out that it's important for us to give so that even the Richard's approach, which is something that I completely agree with everything that you said. So it's worth mentioning this, not just to give Richard the shout out that he deserves, but also to give an example to other people. It can be done. It can be done, and there's no bad consequences for your audience, your space, your experience, your success. You can make room for someone else if you trust them, and if your visions are aligned, if your values are aligned, um, you can give someone else a space for them to shine, or we will do our best to shine, of course, that we will put a lot of effort into this to deliver great content. But it's because of people who already have a spot that, just they just move on the side a little bit. They're not shrinking, they're not dimming us their light, they're just moving a little bit to the side to make room for us. And that's the best example that we can give, right? It's an action, it's something tangible, and it's something that shows that it's not just about declaring something. This is the biggest takeaway from our conversation today, is that we don't just want to push a message that is theoretical, that is philosophical. It's very actionable. You can make room for others, and you can share their stories, and especially the stories of a less obvious success. We usually think that success means one thing only, but there are different takes and different translation of this word. So for Richard to give us the opportunity to do this, I think it's an incredible thing, and I've always been so grateful to him for everything that he's done for me in terms of supporting me and being there. And I think this shows that it's not a personal thing, it's just the way that he sees the world, and that's his mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we will have so many wonderful conversation. We'll have so many wonderful guests. We will dive into so many topics that we kind of touched on today. We teased the possibilities and we'll explore and really allow people to be seen and heard and connected. So, what would be your message to anyone listening today who has felt unheard and unseen in this industry? Where can they start?
It's I feel the responsibility to share the right message, to make sure that we create an impact right away with our little introduction episode. You mentioned something before. You used the phrase of, you know, um, creating a longer table, which is something that I use often as an image. When they say that if you don't have a sit at the table, bring your own chair and push a little bit and squeeze in and make room for yourself. If you're not lucky enough to have somebody creating that room for you, one of the things that people reply to me with is, okay, but what if the table has a length that is not up to me to change? What if I don't have a chance to add one of those, extra tables like the kids' table at Christmas dinners? Um, this is the place. This podcast is the piece of table that you were looking for. It's the little extension that we are providing you so that you can take your chair and bring it along with you and sit and have this conversation and say the things and share the message that you always wanted to say loudly and proudly. um, this is the space. So I hope that people will feel empowered by the space that we are creating, and they will feel um, safe sharing their stories with us.
Exactly. I really hope that listeners have enjoyed our introduction, that they are persuaded and they see the need and they are excited for this podcast. They're excited to see what guests we're going to bring in, what conversations we're really going to dive in, the lessons, the actions, the inspiration that's going to come through. Really, Wired for Connection was created to amplify voices that too often go unheard in the IT and MSP industry. So if today's conversation has resonated with you, if you face challenges, broken some barriers, or have a story that deserves to be told, we really want to hear from you. This podcast is about real experiences, real struggles, and real change from real people. And that means that we need your voice too. So whether you're a woman in tech, if you're LGBTQ plus professional, if you're a person of a color, if you're an ally, if you're anyone who had different path, different experiences, if you're a leader driving the inclusivity, or someone with just a unique journey to share, we would love to have you on the show. Feel free to reach out to us. We will put the contact information in the description below. Find us on social media, wherever. Just drop us a message. We would love to have you and have a conversation with you, because the future of IT is diverse and your story could inspire the next wave of change. So, Vera, any closing words of wisdom for our first ever podcast, TubbTalk Wired for Connection?
Don't be a stranger. Don't be shy. Reach out and let's get connected, because we need your story and we need your human touch in the MSP industry.
Thank you so much for today. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, we'll hear you soon on another episode of Wired for Connection. Until then, I'm Lenka, and this was my wonderful colleague, Vera.
Bye, everyone. I'm Vera, and bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Lenka, and I look forward to our second episode.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.